example to all of us who followed him into imprisonment. I had known of Jim and his military and aviation exploits long before I ever ran into him in the Hanoi Hilton. But his courage and his strength always impressed me. He was a quiet individual, never bragged about any of his incredible aeronautical exploits and his leadership. But you know, he was a man of great faith in his country and in his God and in his family. And I mourn his passing, but I hope that we Americans will never forget that it is men like Jim Kessler that made the country what it is today. I thank you for honoring him. I thank you for your prayers. And I know that to his beloved family, it is our faith that you will see him again. Thank you.
James Kessler was a vital part of the community in Momence and in Kankakee as well. He was deeply involved, for example, at Riverside Medical Center, where he served on the investment committee, the foundation board, the senior living board. For many years, he hosted a golf outing for Riverside and was recognized as Samaritan of the Year. We've received greetings and expressions of condolence from the Riverside family. And then I've asked 4 individuals who knew him very well if they would give us just a series of brief reflections of the man, beginning with Denny Merrick.
Good afternoon. I'd first like to thank all those officials and some non-officials who joined with me to get the flags lowered in our community. It was an overwhelming success. And also to those that put up the message boards, if you haven't seen them on Route 50, instead of playing their ads for the weekend, it's Jim Kessler. I knew the Colonel before I ever met him. In the Air Force, I was assigned to CIA to work in a very special committee to identify who was alive and who was dead among those missing and captured in North Vietnam. I had the privilege of knowing of him by going to South Shore and playing some golf, and I saw this clipping from the Indianapolis Star that said, Castler shot down. His brother-in-law, who ran the course at that time, explained it to me. So I walked into this new group of people in Langley, Virginia, and said, do any of you know Jim Castler? I could have been asking somebody, do anybody know John F. Kennedy? They all knew him. He was a rock star. He was the stud. They said, you want his file? I said, I think I do. So one of the things that we had for intelligence were letters that were written home and then shared with the various services. I suppose not knowing they ended up at CIA, but we read them. They had codes. They had names of people we didn't know about. They had information on torture. And when I finally got to meet Jim in 1973 after his return, it was like coming home. I knew this guy, and he one time said to me, how the heck do you know so much about me? I said, I read your mail. So for 40 years, I got to be his friend, his counselor, and he got to be my mentor. I've written about his heroics. I've spent a lot of time studying this man, but I'm not going to talk about that side right now. I want to talk about the humanitarian side that many of us don't know about. And I want to give you one small example. I would go into a place that sold shirts or slacks, and before I bought them, I would look at the label. And if it said Vietnam, I would, as much as I liked it, it went back on the shelf. Martha and Jim came down to our house one night, and I was talking about that, and he said, Denny, that was almost 40 years ago. Get over it. Now, if a man that's been treated the way he was by the Vietnamese can get over it, I can get over it. In celebrating a life, I am sometimes reminded of the one love-hate person I knew from high school, my English teacher, who made us memorize poem after poem, and I thought she was terrible until I got to college and found out freshman English was easier. And one of the poems that I remember was talking about death and whether there was anything after death. And it was called A Psalm of Life. And that Psalm of Life starts out, tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. And I looked that up the other night, and I found a 7th paragraph, a stanza, which says, and this one I didn't memorize for Miss Mills, lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints in the sands of time. And I thought, that's what Jim Castler did. He left footprints in all of our sands. But I never really thought that that poem or any other poem that I ever found really talked about the Jim Castler that I got to know. And with your indulgence, and apologies to Miss Mills, I haven't memorized it. I will read, I hope. I call it The Hawk. As he watched the single hawk glide through the morning haze, the thought to soar and not to walk filled his younger days. He won his wings quite early on and moved from the airplane's back to flight school where the praise he won and mastered skills he'd lacked. The jets would roar and toward the hills they'd lift into the blue. A pilot with those mastered skills toward countless foes he flew. His bravery would never be in doubt. His strength was that of steel. The enemy he'd often rout. Bullets from his gun they'd feel. And when his jet was shot away, the metal crashing to the ground, the captured pilot would never stray from loyalty so onward bound. And with his release from years of hell, and his family rushed to greet him, he knew his Martha had done him well, raising the children who ran to greet him. The years of flying for our protection came to a deserved end. The colonel's mission changed direction. To local matters his hand he'd lend. And as we gather here today to honor once again a hero whose life we'd say was spent in service for his fellow men, We raise our heads and our eyes to the sky in deepest blue and see the hawk. See the hawk against the sky where Jim for us once flew. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. It means so much to our family. Every woman's dad is their hero. And my dad wasn't just my hero, he was a hero to our family, our country, and a hero to most of the world during a time in history when that really meant something. My dad was shot down in Vietnam on my 16th birthday. The next 7 years were some of the most difficult for my mom, my family, and my dad. But even if we didn't know if he would make it back, I assure you, he did. He never had a doubt. His love was so strong that no matter how bad or how long, he would make it home. After he came home, one day we were driving in the car together, just the two of us. And when we got out of the car, he said, "Do not ever lose your spirit." That resonated and has come back to me as life has unfolded. The world saw his devotion to his country. We were fortunate to witness his devotion to his kids, but especially to the one he loved most, my mom. It truly was his most important mission. And one of the great love stories. 65 years together and so happy. They made movies and wrote books about men like my dad. I was so lucky to have him. He wasn't an actor to me, he was simply my dad, and I adored him. I wish all of you knew the side of my dad that we did. How he loved, how he protected, how he battled, even until the end. I will be forever grateful for the special gift he gave to me. Dad, we will miss you so much, but your spirit and love lives on. Thank you.
Colonel Kastler was an amazing man. He's a patriot, a hero, a man of courage, a man with great strength and spirit, a fierce competitor, whether playing cards or golf, a man with deep love for his family. I am proud to have been Jim's son-in-law for the past 25 years. He had retired from the military, and Jim and Martha were settled here in Kankakee and Momence area before I met him. And he loved owning and operating the South Shore Golf Club. And he loved this community, and he loved all of you. I love coming up here to visit because it meant a lot of free golf. As I think of our time together, I realize that from the very first day I met him to the very last conversation when we visited him in February of this year, in the course of an hour or a day or a weekend we were together, I addressed him in 3 different ways. Sometimes I would call him Colonel. I think I was looking at him and I just thought that with everything he did, he deserved that kind of honor and dignity at that particular time. I wanted to show the respect for everything he had done for me, my family, and all of us. Most often I referred to him as Jim, which was the most frequent way that I always looked at him, but because I thought of him as the husband to Martha and the father to Jimmy and Nan and Suzanne. The third way I often referred to him was Granddad, as the family patriarch and the great love and admiration he has for all of his grandchildren. He was so very proud of each and every one of them. He really had a tenderness about him when he was with any one of his grandchildren. We shared a lot of memories in those 25 years and had a lot of fun times, from